You're watching Frank in Context. All right, so here we go with another conspiracy theory. RFK Jr. Did he say something to the effect of Chinese people and Jewish people invented COVID-19 in order to kill off white people and black people? Because that seems to be what this congressman is implying in this congressional hearing.
Did you say that COVID-19 was a genetically engineered bioweapon that targets black and white people, but spared Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese people?
I didn't say it was deliberately targeted. I just quoted an NIH-funded and NIH published study.
Did you say that it targets black and white people, but spared Ashkenazi Jews?
I quoted a study, Your Honor. I quoted an NIH study that showed that
I'll take that as a yes. I have to move on, I have to move on.
One thing I dislike about these congressional hearings is a lot of the clips that go viral from these, they kind of play out more like smackdowns than anything else. It's not really getting valuable information out for the American people to observe and witness and, figure out for themselves. It's more about like, I'm going to box you into a corner and force you to answer with a yes or no question in order to make the American people go, aha, he said it. He said the thing that he wasn't supposed to say, and we got him. He said that he said it. Right? Like, I hate when the congressmen play these stupid games. I want to know what the NIH study said. And I want to know what RFK actually said. Like, what did he actually say? So I found a clip of that. I'm going to go ahead and play that clip, and then we're going to get into what the study says.
We've put hundreds of millions of dollars into ethnically targeted microbes. The Chinese have done the same thing. In fact, COVID-19, there's an argument that it is ethnically targeted. COVID-19 attacked certain races disproportionately. The races that are most immune to COVID-19 are because of the structure of the genetic structure, genetic differentials among different races of the receptors of the ACE2 receptor. COVID-19 is targeted to attack Caucasians and black people. The people who are most immune are Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese. But we don't know whether it was deliberately targeted that or not. But there are papers out there that show the racial and ethnic differential impact to that. We do know that the Chinese are spending hundreds of millions of dollars developing ethnic bioweapons, and we are developing ethnic bioweapons. That's what all those labs in the Ukraine are about.
So RFK says we don't know if it was deliberately targeted or not. He says it very clearly. He makes a point to say it, right? He's not saying that the Jews and the Chinese invented a bioweapon to target whites and blacks. He's just saying this study exists. And I think it's a poor choice of wording that he used to say targeting. What he's really trying to say is that the study says white people and black people are more susceptible to COVID-19 because of these genetic variations. And if he had just said susceptible, I think this probably wouldn't be so intense because targeting implies that someone is aiming. And that's a problem because when you say targeted, who's aiming, right? So it's kind of saying like someone's aiming. Who is it? Well, it's probably the guys that didn't get infected as much with COVID-19 or who aren't as susceptible to get infected. So I can understand where the congressman is coming from, but it's really just poor choice of words on RFK's part. And honestly, had the congressman just watched this clip, he would see that RFK clearly was just saying it's about susceptibility. However, RFK also makes the point that the US and China spend hundreds of millions of dollars on developing bioweapons. Now, why didn't the congressman question that? If that's not true, that's something that should be called out. If it is true, and you're not going to call it out, then China is spending hundreds of millions of dollars on ethnically targeting bioweapons. And how far-fetched would it be to entertain the idea that one of those could escape a lab and have a negative impact on a certain race of people? That would be, in theory, what it would be designed to do. And RFK is saying there's an argument that COVID-19 is one of these bioweapons. So I don't think he's saying anything so far-fetched or unbelievable. I think he's just looking and making observations and saying there's an argument that this could be the case. COVID-19 could have been a bioweapon that escaped the lab early. And look at this study. It says it impacted certain racial groups differently than other racial groups. So anyway, let's take a look at this NIH study and see what it is actually all about. So I believe this is the NIH study RFK was talking about. It's from 2020, and it's titled New Insights into Genetic Susceptibility of COVID-19 and ACE2 and TMPRSS2 Polymorphism Analysis. You can look this title up on Google and find this study, and I suggest you do because I'm not going to read through all of this. It's quite long. I will just read a brief part of the intro here in the abstract. It says, in this study, we investigated genetic susceptibility to COVID-19 by examining DNA polymorphisms in ACE2 and TMPRSS2, two key host factors of SARS-CoV-2 from about 81,000 human genomes. We found unique genetic susceptibility across different populations in ACE2 and TMPRSS2. So basically it's saying we examined 81,000 samples and we found that certain populations, certain races of people had unique genetic susceptibility because of the variations in their ACE2 and TMPRSS2 protein chains. Now that's what these are. These are protein chains. And if we come down here to this infographic, we can get a better idea of how this actually works. So here you can see there's a COVID virus particle. I don't know what you want to call it. This is the COVID virus. That's what it represents. We've got the ACE2 protein receptor, and we've got the TMPRSS2 protein receptor. Now, I don't know if calling them receptors is the right phraseology here, right? The right wording, so to speak, but that's what I'm calling them. We got like a little Pac-Man on a spring. Now, these proteins will help the COVID protein connect to your cell membrane. That's what this is here. We have fusion of the virus and host membranes. So these two proteins, ACE2 and TMPRSS2, help COVID fuse to the cell membrane and ultimately get its genetic material inside of the cell. And people that have variations in their ACE2 and TMPRSS2 protein chains, particularly these variations down here, those people are going to be more likely to have COVID get into their cells. So before we take a look at these two heat maps, which is what RFK was talking about, I just want to go down to this other infographic real quick to take a look at these proteins so you get a better understanding of what they actually look like and what the mutations actually are. So here we can see the ACE2 protein chain. It's just this big, long, blue, squiggly mess of amino acids. Now that's what a protein chain is made up of, amino acids. And here we see different markers, these yellow orbs. This one is P389, so I don't know what the P stands for, but 389 is the position of the amino acid in the protein chain. Maybe taking a look at the protein chain for TMPRSS2 will be a little bit easier to understand because it's blown up a little bit more. So basically, this protein chain, all along the chain, we have amino acids. So the whole thing is just amino acids, a big long strand of amino acids. And amino acids are responsible for the structure or the shape of the chain. So like here you can see we've got the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein chain. That has like kind of a spike look to it. That's because its amino acids are set up a certain way to give it that shape. At a certain point in this protein chain, there's probably an amino acid here responsible for this kink. And there are some amino acids here responsible for this kind of spiral. So that's what gives the proteins their shape, the amino acids. And if there is a mutation in that chain, so one amino acid that's supposed to be there is a different amino acid, you can get maybe a different kink or a different bend, or maybe it's no bend at all, it's just straight, or maybe it just stops the chain completely. And those mutations can carry on generation to generation, and new mutations can happen, and that's how we get these genetic variations in different populations. So before we go to look at the heat map, I have one helper slide that I want to take a look at, and that's just a Google search of types of amino acids, because we're going to be talking about two in particular just a little bit. We've got arginine and glycine. Now, you might also notice tryptophan. That's one that most people are familiar with. That's an amino acid that's in turkey that makes you sleepy. But particularly, I'm interested in arginine and glycine. So let's go ahead now and scroll up to the heat maps. So these are all the variations in amino acids. And how this is set up, we've got this one, ARG514GLY. Now that stands for arginine at position 514 turned into glycine. So the mutation is that in the general populace, in this population, most people, what they're supposed to have or what is commonly had is arginine at position 514 in the protein chain. But in a particular population, in this case, the African population, that arginine has changed into glycine. Somehow it's been replaced. So no longer do we have arginine at position 514. Instead, we have glycine. And that's what this represents, that mutation or that change. And that's what all of these represent. Each of these represents a different amino acid. I don't know what GLU stands for or LYS, but they're probably listed over here. LYS is probably lysine. So you can get an idea that all of these are just changes to the amino acid along the protein chain. Now, with that in mind, we can look at which of these mutations are present in these different populations. So we've got the African population, the American population, which is like Native Americans and Native South Americans and Mexicans and Middle Americans, that type of thing. Then we've got East Asians, South Asians, Europeans, so that's white people. We've got Finnish people, Amish people, which are also white, but they have like a different gene pool because they're just in their own community. And then we have the Ashkenazi Jewish people. And we've got the same thing down here for the TMPRSS2 protein chain. We have a list of its mutations to its amino acids along the chain and the populations there. So like RFK was saying, you can see African people, black people, and European people, white people, have a ton of these different mutations that make them more susceptible to COVID-19. Africans in particular have higher concentrations of these particular mutations in their population. So if we go up here, 10 to the negative 2, I don't know what that works out to, 0.01 would be the frequency, but what that works out to is about 20,000 people per million. Now, the way I'm figuring these numbers out, we've got 10 to the negative 5, that would be about, let's see, that would be about 20 people per million, so not very much. The way I'm figuring that out is by using the Hardy-Weinberg formula that can help you calculate the number of people in a population that have a particular variation. So if you look down here, we can see the lower heat map shows the allele frequencies, color key, of a variant across different populations. Well, allele frequency is what you can figure out with the Hardy-Weinberg principle, the allele frequency in a particular population. So how many people in a population have that variation? I'm not going to get into what an allele is, but think of it as just a variation to a gene. And the quantity of that variation in a particular population is represented over here. So if we have red, we've got 10 to the negative 2. 10 to the negative 2 is pretty prevalent at about 20,000 people per million. Then down here in the green, we've got 10 to the negative 5. That's about 20 people per million. So Europeans have a lot of these variations, but there's not that many people in the population that actually have it. Whereas Africans have a lot of yellow on the map, so that's 10 to the negative 4. That's about 200 people per million. Still not a lot, but a little bit more people have these particular variations. This one up here, that's all the way at 10 to the negative 2. That's a lot of people. That's that 20,000 per million. And down here, man, we've got all the way to 0.5. That's half. So that's going to be, what is that? Finnish people right here? Finnish people seem to have it's like 75% of their population have this one. So pretty much everyone has this one. Val 160 Met. Anyway, not to get too into this. This is all really interesting to me, but go ahead and read the article for yourself. I think it's really interesting. And I think RFK has a point here. Like, you can clearly see that the African population and the European population has a ton of variations. And the Jewish people, they hardly have any. They don't have any for ACE2 protein chain. And down here, they only have a couple. They've got just a couple. I don't know which ones these are, but just a few. And we look at the East Asians. Now, they have higher concentrations in their population, but overall, they have less of these variations that make you more susceptible. So I don't know. He did say that, it's not definitely like it was intentionally designed to be this way, but it is odd that this is the case, that so many of these things that make you susceptible to COVID are present in the European population and the African population, but seemingly absent from these other populations. Asians, they actually have quite a few of these, it looks like. So that's what the study is about. I think ultimately the study was trying to find ways to kind of like stop up these receptors to prevent them from actually latching on to the COVID virus and allowing it to bond with the cell membrane. So really the study was about how can we prevent this from happening? How can we prevent people from getting COVID? But it kind of uncovered some interesting genetic variation information. So anyway, I strongly recommend you go check this out for yourself because it's pretty interesting stuff. Well, that's all I've got for this one. Thank you so much for watching, and let me leave you with this. Congressional hearings should be about finding the truth, not trying to paint someone into a corner and force them to answer with yes or no so the American people see them in a particular light. It should be about investigating NIH studies. It should be about pulling up the clips of what people actually said, not just asking them over and over again what they said and having a shouting match or getting nowhere. That's what our congressional hearings have turned into lately, and it's more of a spectacle than it is a valid procedure to actually figure out what's true and what's not. And I think that's a shame. So next time you're watching a clip of a congressional hearing, if it kind of seems like court TV to you, just don't take anything too seriously about it.